done.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier, and I'm sorry to stick on this topic, but it's a big one right now, isn't it? Is, we've seen the noise of media and everything else is all about ICE and everything else that's going on. But then, you look back in other administrations, they've done their things too, right? But one thing that stuck out is you said, but we haven't really looked at changing the laws over the years. So why was there a focus on one thing, but then never really figured out what we really all run by, and that's the rules of the game? Why did we miss that?
Why did we not enforce the rules?
Yeah, why didn't we do different rules or look at them again? Or, instead of just, it's almost like it's a Band-Aid. Let's do that instead of like doing the hard work and sitting down and figuring it out. Why did that get missed all these years?
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you in my response because you're looking for something logical. It's politics.
Logical.
It's politics. That to me is the bottom line. It's just how we've used immigrants and immigration laws.
So it's been a tool rather than it's real people, it's real life. Let's somehow deal with it. That is a
like
shame,
I said, it's not rocket science.
Right.
It's not a difficult fix. If there was the political will, it absolutely could be
fixed.
resolved and fixed tomorrow.
So going into Congress, what do you think part of the reform or the start, the beginning, the start? What would you be looking at wanting to do regarding immigration, or even your healthcare, or?
Well, I think one of the unique things about myself is that I work, if you will, across the aisle, across political, perspectives every day. So I think I understand business. I understand, fiscal responsibility. I understand, things from a multitude of perspectives. So when we look at immigration, in addition to giving, DACA an opportunity to legalize, I think we need to get rid of certain arbitrary caps that we've had that make really no sense, whether it is in, H-1B categories, or whether it's, for people who have success in immigration court and there's only 10,000 that's allowed, whether it's victims of violent crime, there's like 10,000, visa caps, so you just make them wait 15 years, but they're here and you're giving them protection and you're giving more. It just doesn't make sense. So I think there's a lot of the laws and the rules that are very archaic, that no longer fit or meet the needs of the current environment, economy, business, the way people live, work, travel. So I think it's really an update of those laws. I would also, look to getting away from there are very, really going back to the last century, rules about quotas from people from certain countries, right? So if you're from Mexico, if you're from the Philippines, if you're from China, if you're from India, you're going to wait longer for family-based visa priority dates and employment-based visas priority dates for no other reason than because you're from those countries. Now, there's some very fascinating history and reasons why, and it was very to be, anti-Jewish, Italian, anti-Irish, anti-Chinese. There's reasons why the system was created. It no longer makes sense. So if you're a citizen of a U.S. citizen, if you're a sibling of a U.S. citizen, and you're from Mexico, you're going to be waiting 24, 25 years. But if you're from England, guess what? You're going to be waiting maybe 6 or 7. And it makes no sense. It's somewhat discriminatory, if you ask me, because the folks are here for the most part, oftentimes. And so it's like, why would we subject them to a quota that really doesn't have a place in today's world? So I think it's really just updating and eliminating some of the barriers that I think keep people from being able to legalize their status that are already in the queue. These are not new people. These are people whose petitions have been pending for more than 2 decades. And it just doesn't make sense.
So, Lisa, we've talked about the greater good of the world in California. Let's bring it home a little bit to Orange County now. What sort of things are you looking to, whether it's spearhead, look into, find out more about the 40th district?
Yeah, so I think, again, right now, I don't hate to beat a dead horse, but the issue of healthcare, right? If there aren't any changes to H.R. one that was passed. In the 40th district alone, there's going to be 160,000 people that are going to lose access to their, Affordable Care Act subsidies. There's going to be another, and I'm now kind of questioning myself if I'm saying 160,000 or if it was 600. I think it's 160,000, and then another 100. I better be careful with my numbers, and I have it on the TikTok. But there's going to be a significant number of people. TikTok. I know, I do. I had to do TikToks now. I've never in my life wanted to get into TikToks, but that is where people are getting information. So my campaign has a TikTok. My firm has a TikTok. I don't have time to do newsletters, but I could talk for 2 minutes or less on any hot topic. And the news is coming out so quickly that we have to get it out.
So let's just pretend. Let's pretend it's 160, right, to make it easier for you.
Well,
but there's a significant percentage.
There's a significant number of people who are going to lose access to their affordable health care. There's going to be a significant number of people who are going to lose their Medicaid. That is concerning for me. And at a time where the federal funding grants are not coming into our state, much less our county. That's filtered out. The nonprofit boards that I sit on and the nonprofits that I'm very involved with, they are cutting. They're cutting their staff. They're losing, their funding sources. So, like I said, it's like this perfect storm where the demand and need for things like healthcare and food and housing are increasing probably higher, and I don't think we've even seen the beginning, to be quite honest.
Yeah, the scale's going the wrong way, isn't it?
Exactly. And then on top of that, we have, many friends of mine and children of friends of mine who can't even afford to rent, in the communities that they grew up, right? Forget about buying a house. They just want to be able to rent a home and close. So there is just something wrong when the cost of living isn't keeping up with, people's wages and what they're going to be able to afford. I've got friends who, and it's depending on who it is, I ask, their children are perhaps being forced to return home and to live home as adults, right? And to save money to be able to see what they can put together for rent or for a down payment. I had one friend's kid call it, what did she call it? Club Med. She says, it's like a Club Med. I said, well, I'm glad you have a positive perspective, but I don't think it's ideal for that generation. I think they're really eager to experience their own independence, to start their own livelihood. And I think that there's ways of making that possible. But again, it's all about what's being done with taxpayer dollars and being able to bring those dollars back to the communities and use it in a way that's going to help people, be able to afford life and to make ends meet.
So where do you think that starts? Is that, as a congresswoman, is that Orange County supervisors? Is that cities? I mean, cities really not too much about that, is it? Where do you? Yeah,
I would say we start with the cities. All politics is local, and I was I haven't mentioned this, but I used to serve on the board of the Kennedy Commission, and one of the tasks there is to really increase affordable housing in Orange County. And the way that it was done is holding cities accountable to their housing elements that's required by the state. Like, they are obligated to set aside in any new construction a certain percentage of affordable homes. It's either that or the developer buys out, right? So they pay the fee or whatever. And so there is litigation that is, that I know the Kennedy Commission, the Public Law Center has recently pursued to bring accountability for cities to do what they're legally obligated to do. It's like, you don't get a free pass thinking that you don't need to provide affordable housing in your community. And maybe it's a NIMBY attitude, out in my backyard, people don't want, but I think we all have an obligation to create balance, to create affordability for vulnerable people in our community, the low-income people, and whether that's veterans or seniors or, immigrants, it's whoever it is that needs it. We all need to be open to creating that space. And when we're not compliant, then I think it's our job to hold those municipalities accountable.
So let's just say, the city is working and they are doing this stuff, and the, land's getting passed, permits being made, because we see this. The developer, on the other hand, he doesn't really care too much about affordability, and affordability is thrown around a lot these days. But I mean, there was a survey done not so long ago, and I think the average is either between $45,000 to $60,000 is the average household income in Orange County, and the houses are over $1 million. How do you fix the affordability? You can't blame that on the city. Where does that branch out to.
Right. So I'm not one to think about punishments and retributions. It's about incentivizing, right? So what federal tax credits, how can we create federal incentives?
Make a better balance.
To create a better balance, right? So maybe they're not inclined, but I think if they are incentivized in a particular way, that they will be encouraged to do the right thing, then I think it's a win-win. So I think that there's programs that can be creative that will incentivize developers and cities for that matter. And, there's groups like Jamboree Housing, right, that I think have been very effective throughout the country, or maybe it's Mercy House that's throughout the country. I think Jamboree Housing is throughout the state. Yeah, and so they're demonstrating, again, California is leading, right? Yeah. They're demonstrating that this is possible and it can be done when there's the political will and the investment being made to ensure that it, comes to fruition.
So talking about community prosperity, where do you see... What do you see that could be brought to? What are we missing? Is it, you mentioned earlier people deciding to move out, or businesses maybe moving. What can we do directly in our area to help with that situation?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. When I say things, I believe in a future and a possibility of people not just struggling to survive, but they thrive. And what do I mean by that, right? I mean that we've got healthy communities, right? I think that we've got one of the big complaints that I hear from Chapman students that come from, all over the country. And they said, do you know how dangerous it is to try to ride a bike? There's no bike lanes in the city. There's no public transportation that helps students get to their internships or where they want to go. And I agree with them. And so how do we create infrastructure to support healthy lives? How do we create infrastructure that allows people to ride their bikes, to jog, to, have open space, right? Especially in inner city communities or in, more densely populated. How do we create more community gardens where people are now investing in their own, food sources? So I think there's ample opportunity, and I think there's such a hunger, honestly, for people to give back and to be a contribution. I think there's been no call, if you will, for people to, rise up and to get plugged in. And I think we can create those opportunities where people can get plugged in, what their contribution is, whether they want to, help volunteer and manage a community garden, whether they want to, work and advocate for bike lanes, in the community. Everything begins at a local level, right? And it's really for those local communities to be invested and engage and determine what it is that they need and to bring that to fruition. But they really need leaders at every level, whether at the city, the county, the state, and the federal level that will support those efforts, as they are taking those leadership roles and making those plans.
Now, when I was looking up for questions to ask you, we were looking across the board there, and there was quite a lot of bits and pieces out there about it. One of the things that I found was there was a motto: live fearlessly, love passionately, and laugh often. You mind sharing what that means to you? Yeah,
that's really one of my favorite quotes, right? So I am not a person that is driven by fear. So for me, that fearlessness, it's really about being bold. It's about, I truly believe that every person has a seed that was planted, and if they are fully self-expressed, if they can really come into their own, if you will, we will only become a more beautiful world for whatever. There's no competition here. I mean, you've got gifts and skills that I couldn't even possibly, attempt to match, and vice versa, And so I think if we can start celebrating everyone and encouraging people to live courageously and not out of fear, I think that there's been so much in our media today that really fear is a tactic to control people. And I really am all about making people contributions, and they can only do that when they step up in a courageous way. And for me, the laugh often part is we need to have fun doing it. Like, fun is something that I have a value for. I enjoy laughter. I enjoy, breaking bread with someone else and learning and conversing and trying new things and not being afraid to try new things. I think that's hopefully something I've instilled in my own kids. It's like, there's no such thing as failure in my book. I said, we celebrate failure in my home. And I said, because even, they come in, whether it's a test or something they messed up in a sport, and And I just said, just tell me one thing you learned. That's all we need is one thing we learned. There's no such thing as failure. We need to be able to laugh at ourselves. We need to be able to celebrate together. We really need to be able to create that community, if you will.
Now, if I may ask, because, being part of a business is a big deal. So, when you become our new congresswoman in the 40th district, what does happen to your business? What do you have to separate? Is conflict of interest? What happens about that?
Yeah, so I'm able to keep the business, but it's going to need to run and operate without me, which it already is, to be quite honest. I've had to take a big step back.
Sure.
I still supervise all of our attorneys, but I have an operations manager that handles all the in and outs of payroll and things like that. So my involvement has definitely changed, I would say, over the last couple of months, and I will not be able to be split, if you will. My full time and attention is going to be given 100% to my district, to my responsibilities as a elected, federal congresswoman. I'm able to keep it. There are limits. I believe it's $60,000 is the maximum I'm allowed to receive from that business. Yeah,
Wow.
so there are limits. I'm really not sure exactly how different. I don't know if it's because I'm a lawyer. I'm really not 100% sure, but there are limits, and obviously they need to be disclosed. So
it's funny, that's the amount of money that averagely people earn in Orange County.
They're going to hold me to it, yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
Okay. So then if a very important case comes up, are you able to pay attention on something like that, or is it like laws are no, I've got to still stay my distance, or are you allowed to? Because
once I'm elected,
yeah,
I would not be able to continue representing people. It's not possible. But the beauty of it, and one of the big cases that I'm working on right now is Mr. Narciso Barranco, who's the gentleman with the 3 U.S. citizen Marine sons. So I remain 100% dedicated to his case, regardless of the campaign.
Right.
I hope to have it resolved before I get sworn into office. But the beauty of having such an incredible team is that it's really my stepping back has really allowed those other lawyers to step up, right? To take more challenging cases than perhaps they've done in the past, because I usually take the most challenging ones, but I'm there to guide them. I'm there to strategize with them. I'm there to be able to, support them in any way that I can. But it's really, I think, been great for them to be able to, come into their own and handle more complex cases than they're accustomed to.
Now, if you're allowed to share some, how is that case going? How's it been for you? I mean, it's been a big news thing right now.
Yeah, no, and it's heartbreaking, because I think especially having produced 3 U.S. citizen Marine sons, you just wouldn't think that this is the way our country would repay you, if you will. His case is going. It will continue to go. We go back for our next hearing in January. He has a parole in place application pending. He also has a family-based petition. He's married to a U.S. citizen. If he had come to me, when his oldest entered the Marines, he would be a citizen by now. Like and that's part of the challenge, right? I think there's many people who, out of ignorance, don't realize that they have an avenue to legalization, right? But they either have been taken for a ride, they've been defrauded, they've trusted the wrong person or notary or attorney. And in his case, that's exactly his situation. He would be a permanent resident, if not a U.S. citizen by now. So I am confident that we'll be able to resolve his case successfully, but he's not alone, right? I think yesterday was the 5th Marine just from Camp Pendleton alone who had a parent, in this case it was 2 parents, apprehended, by ICE. I think the father was deported, the mother we can't find yet. So for me, it is just, it is unfortunate, and that's an understatement, that, our Marines or, servicemen and women from whatever branch, on active duty have to worry about whether or not their own family members could be taken away, could be deported while they're serving this country. There's programs that exist to prevent that from happening, but I don't think that this administration has really given much attention or opportunity in respecting that process or permitting those individuals. The couple yesterday both had green card applications. And that's part of the heartbreak as well, is that this administration is actively going after people who have legitimate petitions pending. They're apprehending them in interviews. They're using information of affirmative filings for benefits to go after those individuals, because until you're granted, you technically have no status. But there just seems something
it's like
fundamentally...
you're cheating the system, isn't it? You're going after one who's done it the right way, but that's easy, isn't it? It's easy pickings, rather than actually doing the hard work and finding the ones they were supposed to deport way back in the day.
Yeah, and it's fundamentally unfair, and I think it's just cruel, and it's just not American, in my opinion.
So out of that interest, when you're in the service, obviously they have a whole bunch of different rules and regulations. Apart from the mental state that it is for these Marines, does it cause issues for these young men who are serving because they've got something going on? Could it hold back their, promotions or what have you?
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of them, and even my godson is in the Army, and I talk to, enlisted, servicemen and women as much as I can, especially during this government shutdown that's significantly impacting them. And with the ones that I've spoken with, it sounds like it's 100% depends on their chain of command. Oh. So yeah, there is retribution, and some of them are very concerned about speaking or complaining or saying anything at all. And so then we try to see, do they have siblings or someone else that can perhaps bring light to this issue? But yeah, I think it depends on their chain.
So when you were mentioning before how, you had folks who, they could have quite easily or not easily, but they could have gone through the process some time ago. Was that when you were mentioning about folks in the shadows? They might have to come forward. Is that the same folks you were talking about, or is that something else?
No, really both. You know, I think it's I call the golden goose egg. I've had clients that didn't even realize that they were U.S. citizens, but because their grandparents, had U.S. citizenship, and maybe they moved abroad and their parent was born elsewhere, and they never. So we go back 2 generations in every consultation that we handle, because we want to make sure we leave no, nothing,
no
uncovered.
stone unturned.
No, exactly. Thank you. No stone unturned. And so for some people, it's like, whoa, lo and behold, they had no idea. Right. They think that they're, without legal status, and they turn out that they can go get a U.S. passport. So those are very rare. But I would say, yes, the predominant ones I'm speaking predominantly of the ones that, are in the shadows right now, but have opportunities. But even those that we've had applications currently filed out of fear. I mean, I've had so many clients leave. They've opted to depart, and I said, please just wait. You're eligible, and the fear is just too great that they would rather leave than to finish the process.
Prop 50. What's your take on it? And do you mind sharing with the audience maybe a little bit more about what it really means to them?
Yeah, so Prop 50 is a direct response, to the, power grab and the congressional seats that were created in Texas. Prop 50, the number isn't, a coincidence. It's not just about California. It's really for all 50 states. Is how do we take a stand to preserve our democracy? What happened in Texas, not a single voter had a say in what, whether that redistricting happened. At the very least, here in California, because we respect our democracy, it'll ultimately be up to the voters. It'll be up to the voters to decide, and they may agree and they may not disagree. But I think, if nothing else, I encourage everyone to exercise their right to vote. I think it's important, and I think we need to appreciate and protect that right as long as we have it. I wish it wasn't necessary, to be quite honest. I am not a proponent of gerrymandering in any way, shape, or form, but I think given what is at stake and now what's happening in other states like Missouri, it's like we're going to just see this continue. And I don't know what a better response could have been, to be honest. And I've asked people this, and I haven't gotten an answer yet. Is there anything else we could have or should have done? And some people said perhaps nothing. And I think there's just too much at stake to have just sat back and watched it happen.
Whether it passes or it doesn't, does it make a difference in the district that you're running for?
Yes, significantly. So right now, the district is 39 miles long, from Coto de Caza, Rancho Santa Margarita, all the way up to Chino Hills. So it's a very long vertical district. It does have part of Time and Bar, so it encompasses LA County, Orange County, and Riverside County. However, with the passage of Prop 50, it goes east Orange County, and then it goes Inland Empire. It goes very horizontal, all the way out to Menifee and Marietta.
Oh, wow, that's quite a long way.
Yes, it's a very long way out.
Yeah.
And so includes Lake Elsinore and other cities there. And it makes the district more challenging for a Democrat to win. In terms of active voters, it goes 9 points more GOP. It only goes 1 point of registered voters. But what nobody's paying attention to, because a lot of people say, oh, it's a losing district, you should give up. I had a blogger that posted something saying that no one should invest in the 40th district. And after meeting with him, I persuaded him. He says, now I see what you're saying. And he says, I go, will you retract then, please? Because it goes 10 points more Latino. And what we don't realize is that the demographics of that Inland Empire are Orange County transplants. It's people who couldn't afford to live here, right? They're commuting 2 hours a day, from Lake Elsinore to
or
get
Lake
into
Paris or anywhere else because it's cheaper out there.
That's the only place they could afford to live. And so that to me is a problem. We've got, it's not for lack of having the resources or even the housing for that matter. We've got, housing being provided for, UCI, doctors and professors, but not for their, lower wage workers. There's no housing that's being, so it's just a matter, again, it's all about balance. It's about finding that true balance, that it can be a win-win where there's enough to go around. We can create, a wonderful future where everyone thrives at all socioeconomic levels, and that we can be, a united states again.
So pass or not pass, does it make it more difficult to sort of like, manage is the wrong word, but to serve over than the other? Or is it really, it's very much the same, just different areas?
So the demographics are very different. Very different. So I don't think it makes it more difficult to serve. I think it's a different population of people who are going to be represented if Prop 50 passes, right? So they're going to be impacted more on the healthcare cuts. They're going to be impacted more on the unavailability of affordable housing. They're going to be impacted more, and one thing we really haven't even talked about, which is, top of mind for me and the agenda is, safety, just basic safety, where people are concerned. I did a lot of work, both in terms of training our law enforcement throughout Orange County on the U visa when it first came out and what their role was in the process, community policing efforts. Like I feel law enforcement has, especially in California, has, made great strides in building those relationships. And then you've got, federal officers coming in and really just terrifying people that children don't know who they can trust. Is it okay to, approach this law enforcement person versus another? But also gun safety, right? I think it's heartbreaking to me today in talking. I mean, my kids are more grown, but I'll tell you two quick stories. One is I was at an event and my daughter, who's, 17 and a senior in high school, was calling me and texting me, and she says, it was noisy, I didn't hear, and I finally called her back, and she was very upset with me and reprimanded me like I was a teenager and said, why didn't you call? I called you, I was texting you, and I said, why? I said, were you worried that I got in a car accident? She says, no, Mom, I thought you got shot. And that was the wake-up call for me to realize that her generation,
it's normal to them now.
This is all they've known. This is all they've seen, whether the schools, from the very beginning, right? The school shootings and everything, that this has just been something that they've become accustomed to, and that is not okay for me. Like that should not be normalized in any way, shape, or form. And then the other story, with friends of mine who have younger kids, that, schools already have a challenging job, right? Teachers have a challenging job, right? And I think there's just a lot that is expected of them that I think goes beyond what their, profession calls for. Right. But now when they have to have policies and protocols to deal with ICE enforcement, now they're dealing with, safety and protocols for preparing for gun shootings
Right.
and security and what does that look like? Because, when you've got a gate or a fence does not keep a, AK-47 to be able to shoot through that, or windows, or, doors. And so to me, they've got now apps, right? That I've had friends who have small children that every student is obligated to have on their phone, as well as the parent, which is an active shooter map. So I guess you must press a button and then it alerts the families of those, students that there's an active shooter on campus. My sister was a school teacher in Cudahy in Los Angeles for LA Unified, and I remember even back in the day, it was more gang related than anything that we're seeing now.
Sure.
But she would be on lockdown, on a regular basis, for hours at a time. And that creates a tremendous amount of stress and trauma. So even the preparation that schools have to go through to protect the students is traumatizing. Right? To have to reassure, well, there could be an active shooter, and how do you, and yeah, I can tell stories. There was a shooter outside my daughter's school not that long ago, and what that was like. And I know there was a false alarm at Foothill High School, which is also in the district. There was another, false alarm where the kindergartners was a preschool, and they pretended to be little bunnies and to hide in the closet, and it's like they're trying to be creative, but it's like in this day and age, to me, there's no excuse that we deserve to give our children a better childhood and a better future. And so, gun safety is a top priority for me.
So just out of interest, because it seems like you've done some research into all this. What do you think's changed between 15, 20 years ago? I came in 20 years ago, didn't really hear too much about this, compared to today. I mean, yeah, we've got trending, we've got online stuff, whatever, but and guns have always been available in America. What do you think the change is? Why is there a sudden shift to where even faith-based organizations have to be worried?
Yeah.
Why do you think that's happened?
I think we are just beginning to see the mental health crisis.
There you go. That's a good
And I
answer,
really
yeah.
believe that the people behind a lot of these actions, right, are not well. They are not of sound mind. They are not your typical, gun owner, if you will.
Right.
They are broken. They need help themselves. And I think without thorough background checks and some sort of mental health evaluation being done at the front end, I'm afraid we're only going to see that increase, because I think the mental health crisis in this country, especially after and during the pandemic and post, is only going to get worse. And I can only imagine what is going to become of a lot of the people impacted by even ICE activity, today, and what we see happening in Chicago and people who's lost loved ones. And it's like, so it's not enough to say that it's people who are angry or upset. It's really people who are not well. And we have plenty of states that still don't have any, background checks at all whatsoever. Yeah. And I think we need to be
So that
careful.
really leads back into what you'd said at the very beginning of this episode, was really to do with healthcare. So losing healthcare or having problems with that is just we're on the slippery slope.
Yeah.
Is really what I hear from what you're saying, because it sort of makes sense a little bit.
And I do believe that government needs to get back in the business of mental health institutions, if you will.
Right.
They all got shut down in
many years ago,
California
didn't they? Yeah.
under Reagan, and I think it's going to be necessary that we bring some semblance of those hospitals back, because I think our people are crying out for help, and it's manifesting itself in very dangerous ways.
The leading into the healthcare thing is something not many people talk about, really. They just keep going on about, well, ban all guns, but that's not the problem.
No.
That's not it.
And I'm not a gun
And there's not
banner.
many people who say, well, I feel it's more of a healthcare situation, which really, if you think about it, it really is. So where are families going to look after these kids? You mentioned earlier before that there's so many families now that have the kids living with them and all the rest of it. So they're all under one roof. They're saving a bit of money here, but then everything else goes up in price. And if you don't have the healthcare, how are they going to look after them? Yeah,
and I think the crisis begins in the childhood. It's not when they're
adults. No, it's way later on.
So,
it's earlier on.
And how have we failed as a society? And I mean, we haven't talked about this at all, but I firmly believe in the need of childcare, right, for people who are working and not leaving children home alone. That there needs to be an infrastructure to support. Now, is it government's role to raise children? No, but it is government's role to support families, in my opinion, and making sure that society has the cohesiveness that it needs to be able to function properly and to support, each other in that infrastructure. And I just don't think we're seeing that.
Well, I think one of the things that you mentioned earlier was you spoke about how, there's a role for government, there's a role for we the people, right? And when you're talking about, well, I feel that there's something there for healthcare, for far younger kids, there are some school districts that lay that on already. I agree with you. I don't think it's for the government to raise your kids, but if they were to assist in some type of programming that would allow for that to be more, because more of us have to work now than we maybe did 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
Excuse me. I feel that you're on the right track thinking about helping those who are working. And it's not just about single mum and dads anymore. It's about families, how to, raise their kids.
Yeah. And I think the fundamental question is, what is the role of government? How do we support the family, right? The family is the most basic unit where values are instilled, where support is received, where, ideally, right? These are all, ideal, situations. I know people come from, broken homes and family dynamics that are not healthy.
Sure.
And not conducive to success. But I think that we have a responsibility to provide the best environment, if you will, right, for communities and people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be government directly providing those services, right? But it's really, again, it's utilizing those taxpayer dollars so that the nonprofits, right, who are effective in doing this well can do that. But I also think, again, it's an opportunity for people to really, people that are able and people that can, to see that there is a place for them to contribute, right? I think a joke around my household is my kids learn very early on, don't ever complain about being bored because I will find something for you to do, right? And when I get asked today, people ask me all the time, what can I do during this time? So I'm like, I did a TikTok. Here's 7 things you can do right now where you are. Start where you are. Nobody's asking you to do anything, magnificent or great. It's like, are you in a school? Great. Start in your school. Are you in a church? Great. Find out what people need. They need food delivered? Then great. Why don't you help food delivery? Do you need to do it every day? No. Can you do it once a week, for 1 hour? Give what you can. And I think that is really the best, in my experience of living in this country, that America brings to the table. That really, when called to the challenge, people do rise. Right. And I think we're not challenging people to rise to this opportunity and occasion where they can be a contribution. We just need to create the infrastructure where people can plug in. It's not, government isn't going to solve all of our problems. Government isn't meant to, right? But we as the people certainly have the ability, the capacity, the knowledge, the skills to contribute something. And that might be something as basic as you have a neighbor with a special needs person. Maybe they just need a break. Yeah. Maybe you can take that child to the park, assuming you have a trusted relationship with them. But there's always something we can do. I think the question really is, are we looking for what we can do? Or are we looking for what government can do for us? And to me, that's the difference.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I was only saying to my wife the other day, is the thing that when I was growing up, that was different about America compared to other countries is America were very much together. Like you just mentioned, neighbors might have other neighbors round for a barbecue or something. If somebody was hard up, somebody might say, hey, what's going on? Hey, let me help you mow your lawn, whatever it is. Yeah. Maybe even help them find a job. And it's sort of gone. It's sort of dissipated as that. And there's a big value in that when people come together like that. I feel that you're definitely on the right path with that.
And it's something we're going to need to create. It's not going to exist by default.
It always starts at the top and has to come down.
Yeah.
Right. We've sort of like we've detached ourselves, and we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you any public events coming up where people can like meet with you or talk to you coming up?
Yeah. So there's a fundraiser tonight in Anaheim.
Wow, okay.
You can visit the website. You can message us to get more information and details. That might be too light, but we have lots of events. So Prop 50 is a big hurdle, if you will. I think there is more support across the state than there is against it. However, it's going to really determine whether or not people show up to vote. And I think right now, both in terms of endorsements and fundraising, everybody's waiting to see what the maps are ultimately going to look like. And I think what's really important for your listeners to know is that I am running in the 40th, old map, new map. It's still my district. It does change the demographics. It changes the political affiliation if Prop 50 passes. I think Prop 50 is important. And I just want to, people, even Democrats that I've spoken to that are concerned that it's somehow dissolving the independent commission. It absolutely isn't doing that. It's just putting it on hold, if you will, just until 2030. And I wish it wasn't necessary. And if I could introduce legislation to end gerrymandering, nationwide, that's something that I will, work to do. But in the meantime, I think it's necessary for the sake of our democracy in this country. But we'll see what happens with Prop 50. I'm up for the challenge, and I think we'll be able to win this seat either way.
We've come to the time in our episode here where we turn the mic back to our guest. You've answered lots of questions, and thank you. It's been a pleasure learning from you today as well. But we want to give you that opportunity, and it could be something towards talking about your candidacy or whatever it is. But I just wanted to, or it could have been something we missed as we're chatting today. But I wanted to give you that opportunity.
No, thank you. I think what I would just say, for me, this campaign is about transforming politics and the conversations that we have around the issues we care about most, right? I think enough Americans are tired of the shaming and blaming and complaining. And I think it's come to a place that we really need to rise above that noise and to come together as a community. There's been so much division. And my goal is really about bringing people together and across the aisle. I've got Republicans supporting my campaign. I've got Dems. I've got independents, and I really want to work with anyone and everyone that's willing to work together. And I think for me, fundamentally, it is an opportunity. Like, people think I'm crazy. I'm like, why would you enter a race, certainly at this, point in time and everything that's going on? But I really see the opportunity. I see an opportunity for, people to get re-engaged in government. I think we've fallen asleep. I think people really are waking up and taking a stand, taking back their power. I think we need to be more vocal and engaged in terms of what our electeds are saying or doing at the federal level, state level, local level, whatever it may be, because we, the people, ultimately, are the government. We are the ones that have a say in terms of what is done with our tax, dollars. What is the future that we want to be able to create? And I think for me, first and foremost is my love for this country, my love and respect for the Constitution. I want to ensure that our constitutional rights remain for future generations on every front, whether it's free speech or due process, no longer having unlawful apprehensions. And I really am committed. I am very committed to ensuring that government is there to serve our people and in the best way possible. And I just think that there is no place that we can go from here than up. So yeah, very, very privileged and honored to, be running this race. Not just, it's not about me. It's really about you and us together. So my campaign, one of the slogans is a campaign driven by people and not by partisanship. And I couldn't mean that any more than it speaks for itself.
I think after what I've learned about you today, I totally believe that you are like that. So thank you for that. So just out of interest, if people would like to find out more about you, is there a website they can go to?
Absolutely, yes. You can visit lisaramirez.com. Pretty basic, straightforward. The launch video's there. We're building out the platforms, and content will probably be completed closer to the end of this month. But please, I would welcome any and all support. It's going to take a country to not only flip this one seat, but to bring the balance of power back. And I think that's what we're really in need of right now, is just to have more balance in our federal government.
Well, thank you so very much for coming on today, Lisa.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful to speak with you.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Chamber Talk. Until next time, stay inspired and connected by visiting nochamber.com and selecting sign up for news at the homepage. For more interviews, visit chambertalk.podbean.com.